Hi, it's Gooza here. I'd just like to run through a Nintendo 64 portable that I've made. I actually made this one before I made the GameCube, but I never got around to doing a video for it, so here it is. I used an Atari Lynx, same as I did with the GameCube, and I've fused in the Nintendo 64 official buttons, and I've done the GameCube controller mod because I like the feel of the stick a lot better. I used a 4.5-inch eBay screen. I think they sell them as car reversing camera screens, but it's just got simple RCA inputs and works nicely with the 64. I've put again off eBay, a small iPod speaker as the audio amp with the left and right speakers here, and here's the touch switches for the volume. So the case was just made by basically chopping up the Atari Lynx. I chopped all this section out and used the screen that came, or the surround that came with the screen, and fused all that in there. It takes a long time to get these cases perfect, and obviously mine isn't, but I had to move on with my life after sanding for hours and hours and hours. But you can get all this perfect if you spend enough time on it. On top of the buttons off a DualShock controller, I did use them originally for the shoulder buttons on the 64, but I didn't like the feel of them, so I put these two Z buttons triggers on the back. They feel much nicer. Also on the back, these are the switches for the screen. This is the master power switch. Down the bottom is a three-way switch that in this position runs off the power socket, 12 volts. In this position runs off the internal batteries, which are lithium ion 7.2 volt batteries. I think they're the BP511 camera batteries, which are readily available on eBay as well. I didn't relocate the cartridge port. I didn't feel it was necessary because it sat nicely here above the screen and saves a lot of time by not relocating this, and I really didn't know where I was going to put it if I did move it. On top, DualShock controller shoulder buttons, which I originally put as the L and R buttons. I didn't like the feel of them too much, so on the back I actually added, well, this was the original Z trigger, but I used another Z trigger as the right shoulder button. I just found it much easier aiming in games like GoldenEye, which is one of the ones I play most. On the back, these are the switches that control the screen. This is the master power switch. On the bottom we have the switch that chooses between the wall wart or the internal batteries, and this is the headphone jack. As far as charging the batteries go, under this bottom panel I have a Dean's connector, and I use a smart charger to charge the internal batteries, just the same charger that I use for radio controlled model batteries. Okay, so let's have a look at the internals. There's 4 screws on the back. These are all the screw posts that were in the original Atari, so I tried to keep them. Makes the whole unit strong and hold together quite well. It's actually several years since I made this, so I might forget what a few of the things are. Here's the 2 batteries, obviously. These are just camera batteries, lithium ions. What have I done? I've put heat sinks on the chips of the N64, so taken off the large heat sink that came with it, and these save a lot of room. This is a expansion pack which has a heat sink on it as well. You can see how much trimming I've done to the motherboard. You can get them smaller than this, but I basically trimmed it enough until it would fit in the case. And you can see up around the top of the cartridge port here, there's been quite a bit trimmed off. And there's a couple of spots where I had to rejoin a few connections. They're not immediately obvious. But yes, down the bottom near the LED, I trimmed quite a bit off there as well. There's plenty of trimming guides online if you're interested. Over this side, you can see where I've chopped up the boards inside the controller, and these over here are GameCube. What's that one? That's the stick, and that's the D-pad. I used the buttons off an official N64, but I had to use a different controller because the official one is not compatible with the GameCube control stick, so it's a different controller board but the official buttons. Underneath this bit of paper is the screen. The paper's there just to insulate it, make sure nothing comes into contact with the metal surround. Up here is the very small audio amp, just here. So this was just an iPod speaker. It's got a couple of little volume buttons on there. I've wired them to those buttons on the front so you can control the volume. Little speakers here, I think they were DS replacement speakers. This is the memory pack. So I've actually got a memory pack in there permanently. I mean, you can take it out if you like, but most games save to cart, so you don't need the memory pack. There's only a handful of games that it's really necessary. Apart from that, you can see everything fits in this one quite comfortably. I had a lot more trouble getting the GameCube to go together than the 64, so if you want to start out modding, I recommend the 64 well and truly before you attack a GameCube. So I've just plugged in the wall adapter, so this is running off 12 volts. And cartridge in the top, obviously, and flick the switch on the back. So it's quite loud with these tiny little speakers, and very clear sound. And this screen's really good actually, it's quite cheap. You don't need a fancy screen for the 64 because it's not high resolution, so this one does the trick nicely. Anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this little run through of my N64 portable. There's much prettier ones out there and much smaller ones as well, but this was, well, it was my second attempt. I did make another one before this, but it was kind of a tester. This is one I put a little more effort into. It's very doable, and as I said before, much easier than some other consoles to portabilise. So the 64 is a good place to start. They're pretty robust. Most of the soldering connections are very very large, so you don't need to sort of use a magnifying glass or anything. And the board only has, I think it's got 2 layers, so some of the other boards out there are very hard to chop up because you can get yourself into lots of trouble and brick them fairly quickly. All right, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.